I had always had an affinity for him, an admiration for his easy grace, his natural charisma, despite the fact that for the better part of a decade, my then-girlfriend kept a picture of him running shirtless through Central Park on her refrigerator door. Maybe my lack of jealousy towards this particular pinup was tamped down by empathy for his loss of his father and an appreciation for how complicated it is to be the subject of curiosity and objectification from a very young age. That said, when my girlfriend and others would constantly swoon over him, when I would see him continually splashed across the newspapers, resplendent like an American prince, I wasn't above the occasional male thought of, screw that guy. As a person navigating the waters of public scrutiny, you are often unable to hold on to your personal heroes or villains. Inevitably, you will meet your hero, and he may turn out to be less than impressive, while your villain turns out to be the coolest cat you've ever met. You never can tell, so eventually you learn to live without the rooting interest in the parade of stars, musicians, sports champions, and politicians. And you lose the ability to participate in the real American pastime, beating up on people you don't like and glorifying people you do. I had not yet learned that truism when he and I first met. I was at the point where I was deeply unhappy with my personal life, increasingly frustrated about where my career seemed to be going, although from the outside it would probably appear to anyone observing that I was among the most blessed 24-year-olds on the planet. And in an effort to find substance, meaning, and excitement, I had become deeply involved in the world of politics. It was at one of these political events, the kind where movie stars mix with political stars, each trading in each other's reflective glory, both looking to have the other fill something missing inside of them, that we were introduced. "Rob Lowe? I'd like you to meet John Kennedy Jr.," someone said. "Hey man, good to meet you," I said. He smiled. We shook hands, and I was relieved that my then-ex-girlfriend wasn't there to notice that he was slightly taller than I was, or to comment on who had better-looking hair. We made some small talk, and I remember thinking, how does he do it? How does he carry the scrutiny? How does he attempt a normal life? Is it even possible? Is it even worth trying? He was charming and gracious, and didn't seem to be unnerved by the multitudes of eyeballs stealing glances as we spoke. Eventually, as we were both single guys in our 20s, the talk turned to girls. "Maybe we should get out of here. Go find where the action is," he said. I looked at him. "Dude, you're JFK Jr., all right? You don't need to go anywhere." He looked at me and laughed. And as he did, I saw a glimpse of his father and was reminded of his family's legacy of sacrifice and tragedy, and was glad that he was carrying the mantle so well and with so much promise for the future. Eventually, we went our separate ways, never teaming up to hunt down any fun that night, although I did later wrestle open a wet bar at 2 a.m. with a vice presidential shortlist candidate. Over the years, I watched him navigate the currents of fame, dating, career ups and downs, curious to see how his life would play out. Sometimes he and I would both appear on those shameful lists of hunks. Can there be a more degrading or frankly gross word than hunk? Hunk of what? Hunk of wood? Hunk of cheese? Yikes. There may have even been a girl or two whom we both coveted, but that was the extent of my contact with him. In the late 90s, my wife Cheryl and I were on a romantic ski vacation in Sun Valley, Idaho. We still felt like newlyweds, in spite of having 2 beautiful baby boys, from whom we'd escaped for a rare evening out. Sun Valley is one of my favorite spots. It's old school, as the site of North America's first chairlift, glamorous, the home of Hemingway and early Hollywood royalty, and boasts one of the greatest ski mountains in the country. I'd been going there since the mid-1980s, and had always liked the mix of people you might encounter at any given time. One evening at a big holiday party, I felt a tap on the shoulder. It was John Jr. "How've you been, man?" he asked with a smile. I introduced him to Cheryl. He congratulated us on our recent marriage. After a while, Cheryl went off on her own, leaving the 2 of us alone in the corner, watching the party move on around us. Even in this more rarefied crowd, you could feel the occasional glare of curious observation. A ski instructor passed by, a movie star. A local ski bunny brushed by John and flipped her hair. "How do you do it?" he asked. so low against the buzz of the party that I couldn't quite hear. "I'm sorry? How do you do it?" he repeated. "I mean, how did you settle down? You, of all people." I looked at him and he was smiling, almost laughing, as if covering something else, some other emotion I couldn't quite discern. At first I thought he might be gently poking fun at me. Up until my marriage, my life had been publicly marked by a fair number of romances, some covered with great interest in the papers. But I saw that his question was real, and that he seemed to be grappling with some sort of puzzle he could not solve. I realized he was looking across the room to a willowy blonde. She had fantastic blue eyes, the kind of beauty and magnetism that was usually reserved for film stars. She was standing next to my wife, Cheryl, also a blue-eyed blonde, with a beauty and presence that made her seem as if a spotlight and wind machine were constantly trained on her. I put two and two together. "Looks like you have a great girl. And that's half the battle right there. She's obviously amazing, and if she's your best friend, marry her. You can do it. Don't let anyone tell you can't, that you're not ready or not capable. Come on in, man, the water's warm. I'm here to tell you it is. If she's your friend, in addition to all the other stuff, pull the trigger. Don't let her get away. You never know what life will bring." I think he was a little taken aback by the passion of my response. I'm not at all sure what he had expected me to say, but he asked, "So what the hell?" John nodded, and we went on to other topics. The next day, we met to ski on the mountain. He snowboarded, ripping down the face fast and free. But the weather was turning, and a whiteout was upon us. In the snow and speed and the wind, we were separated. I looked up over the ridge, and he was gone, lost in the clouds. John did marry his blonde, his Carolyn. I was glad for him, and thought about sending him a note, but somehow I didn't. Of all my character flaws, and there are a number of them, procrastination is my most distinctive. Instead, I wished him luck, children, and the longevity of love with one of my non-alcoholic beers as I watched the coverage on Entertainment Tonight. As a huge political junkie and unabashed admirer of our country, I was a huge fan of his brainchild, George Magazine. When someone finally stopped asking celebrities appearing on its cover to pose in those George Washington wigs, I thought, okay, they're rolling now. The end of the century approached. The 90s were a time of building for me. Building a life that was sober, drained of harmful, wasteful excesses, and manufacturing in its place a family of my own. This was my priority through the decade, and that work continues to pay off today with the love of my sons, Matthew and John Owen, and the constant gift of the love of my wife, Cheryl. Where the 80s had been about building a career, the 90s ended with my having built a life. By the end of the decade, my career was very much in flux, just as it had been at the end of the previous one. I had had some successes in the 90s, always made money, but the truth was I was like a man pushing a boulder up a hill. A huge, heavy, difficult boulder made up of some career mistakes, projects that didn't meet expectations, and 20 years of being a known quantity. And not only not being a new sensation, but something worse. Being someone people in Hollywood took for granted, someone with no surprises left in him.